Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Neuroleadership. I think we maybe close the doors. Yeah. Before we get started, please stand up. Please put your arms straight up in the air. Please put your arms straight up in the air. Please put your arms straight up in the air. Thank you. You can take it down. And you can also sit down again. What did we just see? I gave you two ambiguous messages. One was different than the others. And usually when people get different messages between what you do and what you say, people follow what you do. And in leadership, we see that situation every day when leaders tell us something, but they self-behave in a different way. And psychologists have known this effect for a long time. It's the basis for imitation learning. There's been lots of research on this. But now neuroscientists can really tell us the mechanism behind it, what's happening in our brains and why we behave that way. Why do we follow behavior? And for 10 years ago, there was a researcher in a lab in Parma, Giacomo Rizzolatti, and he was studying motor activity in the brain. What is motor activity? When you decide you want to take an object with a grasping movement, and only monkeys and human beings can do this type of grasp. Other animals, they can take stuff, but they do it like this with a fist. And he was studying how the brain prepares for that movement when you decide to take that pen until you grasp it. And what happens is he has a monkey sitting on a chair in a laboratory. In front of him is a bowl of food like raisins and nuts and monkey food, interesting things, so to motivate them to grasp things with that movement. And they could isolate neurons that would only respond to a grasping movement, but not when you grasp with your entire fist. So what you have is you have an electrode here in the monkey brain and the motor cortex, and whenever the monkey grasps with that movement, you will hear a sound from the amplifier, and I think I can do it for you here. It's like this, actually. So whenever the neuron responds, you get a sound for each electrical activity. And you might think we are leaders here, that what do we care how monkeys eat food and grasp objects? That's interesting for neuroscientists, but not really relevant for us. But 10 years ago, the monkey had a break, was sitting on a chair with his arms crossed, and the student came in and was hungry and took from the monkey bowl with a grasping movement, a nut or something. After time, you lose, you eat from the monkey food, you don't care anymore. I've been working with monkeys too. I know this. You don't care so much anymore. And suddenly, they heard the sound from the amplifier. And they were wondering what's going on. The monkey isn't doing a thing, but still his brain is active. And this was the moment where they discovered the so-called mirror neurons. What are mirror neurons? They are active when you do something, a certain thing, but also when you see somebody else doing the very same thing. So mirror neurons are actually the basis for empathy in our brain and for communication. And I think any normal scientist who's very busy would have thrown away that data and just thought, let's send the monkey to a holiday. But instead, one of the most important discoveries in neuroscience has been made through this mistake. And today we know that empathy is something we are born with. You don't need your mother to tell you be nice to the other children, then you learn to be social and empathetic. We have a system in place in our brain that helps us to instantly feel the way other people feel. If you're sitting here in this class and there's somebody very happy and cheerful, and this person might spread this atmosphere in the entire room, because we all constantly have our mirror neuron system on. It's something you can't turn off. As soon as you're surrounded by other people, your brain is constantly picking up what other people are doing and mirroring their activity in your own brain. And that's how you as a leader, your behavior, and especially your behavior, will have a great impact in the organization. Because what they found, and now mirror neurons are studied widely in human beings. They started with monkeys, but now today there's lots of research on our mirror neuron system. And what they found is that when you have a great relationship with somebody, your mirror neurons will respond more strongly to that person because we make a difference. People we like, we pick up more easily. I have a baby at home, she makes and I'm running, you know. I pick up every little change of mimics, and wherever people will say whatever she has, I don't care. And the same is for leaders. When people are high in the hierarchy, people are more attuned with their mirror neuron system to these people. So you people really will change the way people feel around you just by being there. Today's session is about leadership and the brain. The mirror neurons are just an example of new insights that have changed the way we look at human behavior. Many of the theories from psychology have been revised based on these new findings, and today I'd like to talk about two things. First, I'll give you a little overview of how the brain works, just very high level, just the most important thing for you to know as a leader. I think if you had wanted to study neuroscience, you would have done so like I did. You didn't, so I give you a really high level overview of the most important functioning as it's relevant for you as a leader. And then I'd like to show you one compelling model that you can put at work right at place, and it's a model that based on neuroscientific findings. And you will walk out of the session and you have this model and you can put it at use. At any time, I'm open to questions and challenges, and if you're bored or want to do something else, just let me know, we do something else. As you see, we have no slides, or I think I can take this away. I might show you some brain pictures at some point, but this is a very flexible and interactive 2 hours we have together. So at any point, if you're bored or don't understand or have a special question, I'm happy to adapt to your situation. Okay, let's start out. Here's the thing. Now we start with a little test. I think that's always a good start. Who knows the Maslow pyramid of needs? Heard of it? Do you know the basic? Oh, wow. Okay, you guys have been to many leadership trainings. What's the basic? What's at the bottom? Survival. Okay, food, I hear. Okay. Very often we call this basic needs, okay? Once you have sleep, food, sex, everything you really need for basic survival of the species, drinking and eating and just surviving, we can say it's basic needs. We don't have to get all 5 levels, but once you are have your basic needs, what's next? It's a little bit a pyramid of needs. Once this is covered, then you start desiring other things. You don't have to be precise with it. What do you think comes next? Sorry? Okay, hygiene, so like safety, I think it's called safety. So just that you have a safe environment where you are not totally attacked all the time by the people. Next thing I give it to you is social needs. It's a little bit the idea, once you have food and survive and you feel safe in your environment, then you start making friends and forming families and really having social relationships. And at the very top of it, I think many people, once you have all of this, then you strive for self-actualization. So a little bit thinking, oh, I want to become an EY partner, that would be really something that makes me happy. That kind of thoughts only come after your basic needs are fulfilled. So the problem with that model is that from a neuroscientific model, and I see that most people know this, and you're not a psychologist and you don't spend all your time in leadership courses, but this is a very well-known model that's been used all over the world. And the problem is, from a neuroscientific point of view, it's totally wrong. So I'd like to cross it out. Why is it wrong? And I will destroy this model, but I give you a new one at the end that you can use. So I'm not just bashing everything. Social needs, which is, for Maslow, is the third point. A lot of things have to happen until you strive for social needs. If you're in Africa and you don't get any food, the idea is you don't go and look out for friendships and family. You look that you get some food so you survive. It's wrong. Social needs are at the very basic of the pyramid. Why is that so? We survive because we form strong relationships. Our ancestors used to live in small groups of people, and they would only survive because they have friends, because the biggest enemy of human beings are other human beings that would attack us. They would live in tribes, and you need protection from the people around you. Also, the baby that is born will not go and look for berries in the forest or for, I don't know, go and survive and look for water. The baby will attach itself to the mother, so she takes care of him. So if you look at the example from the mirror neuron I gave you this morning at the beginning of the session, we have a system in place in our brain that's constantly on, that's constantly attuned into other people. Our brain is very social in its very nature, and I can tell you one basic principle of the brain is that the brain is efficient. You know the saying, we only use 10% of our brain. It's actually not true, because we use all our brain, but we don't use all of our brain at once. It's like with a machine, you don't want to, when you produce something, put all the pieces together at once. The brain is very efficient which parts it's using at the time, but the social parts of the brain are always on. That shows how important they are to us. You never turn them off. Sure, when you sleep, many parts of the brain are deactivated, but when you're awake and around, your brain is always looking for what other people are doing. So I'd like to today show you a model that's based on social cognitive neuroscience. There's a lot of notion going on about the social brain, because one of the most important discoveries of latest years is that we are way more social than we used to think from a psychology perspective. And I would like to give you an alternative to Maslow today, that's just as easy to use, but it's more giving justice to how people really are. So here it is. Let's start out with a very little part about how the brain works. You will have to let me know how much detail you want. Some people want to know all the neurotransmitters and all the details, and some people say, who cares, couldn't care less. So I do it however you like. Ask if you want to have details, otherwise we do it high level so you don't have to bother with unnecessary information. If this is the brain from the side, you have the eyes here. Let's think about most companies who hire consultants like us do it because they want high performance. They have the idea, we want the best people in place. We want to make sure they really deliver high performance and they can get their teams to deliver high performance. When we look at high performance in the brain, there's one part that's really important, and it's called the prefrontal cortex, PFC. And that's the part of the brain that makes us different from the animals. It's the part of the brain that has come very late in evolution, and it's a part of the brain we need for rational processing, higher level processing. What do you do with that part of the brain? That's the part of the brain when you make a decision, when you think about different options, when you create an Excel model, when you look at this P&L. That's where all the intelligence goes to. In the end, you're sitting here because you have a very well-functioning PFC, otherwise you wouldn't have made a partner. It's obvious that's what you need, and that's what companies are looking for, people who can really perform well and have well-functioning brains. This is also the part of the brain that matures only at age 18 or 21. So people who have teenagers will understand that this part maybe is not functioning properly yet. And it's a part of the brain that's also responsible for inhibition and delay of gratification. And if you think about it, teenagers will do lots of stupid things. They don't know better. It's their prefrontal cortex that's not fully matured yet. And the interesting, maybe one last information about this, there was an experiment in the 60s where they gave children the option of having one marshmallow now or 2 5 minutes from now. It's a very simple task. You can do it with your own children if they have the right age, or even at the different age and see what they do. And the children who go for the marshmallow right now are not as successful later in age when they're adults in life as the ones who can delay gratification and wait. The prefrontal cortex already grows in small children, and some have a more powerful prefrontal cortex. It's something you can also influence by education, by not giving them everything all the time directly, by letting them learn to work for things. Lots of this is genetics, but there's always things you can influence. Otherwise, this session wouldn't make sense. I would say your brain is as it is, go home, do with it what you want. Education does make a difference in how your prefrontal cortex develops, and very important for success later in life, more important than intelligence, is something that's called executive control. That's the ability to delay gratification, to plan ahead, and to not always get all things at once, but to wait for it. I think you get a clear idea what our prefrontal cortex is capable of. Here comes the thing. That's what companies want. They want you to have a well-functioning prefrontal cortex that will assure you make great decisions and are performing well. But the prefrontal cortex is always overruled by another part of the brain, and that's called the limbic system. That's the part of our brain where emotions are processed. It's a part of the brain that's way older from an evolutionary perspective than the prefrontal cortex. And you could say if these two are in a fight, the limbic system will always win. But before we talk about that connection, I'd like to show you two basic principles of brain function. I think if you only take this away from that session, for me that would be enough, because you will see it everywhere in daily life. It's something, it might seem simple at first, but once you really realize what it means, you will see it everywhere in action. There's two basic things that our brain does. And you need to think, I told you that we never activate the entire brain at once. We always activate so-called neuronal networks or circuits. So parts of the brain are active together and they form like a group of co-workers. It's like the brain is in a certain state, you could say, attuned to a certain task. You can either be in what is called a reward state. What is a reward state? That's when you are happy, you meet people you like, you're eating chocolate. Whenever you experience pleasure and are engaging in something where you're having fun, the reward state kicks in. It's a part of our brain. I give it for those of you who love details. Nucleus accumbens. That's the structure in the brain and the limbic system where dopamine will be released. It's a neurotransmitter. I can get to more of that later, but it's a substance in our brain that changes the entire functioning of the brain, and it will make you happy. It gives you a burst of energy. So whenever you have a positive experience, the reward center will kick in. Interestingly enough, let's say somebody tells you, great job, well done in that session, loved what you did in that presentation. That will kick your reward center up. Same thing if you take drugs, it's a very same reaction. So it's, and I'm not saying you guys take drugs and have any experience of that, but usually the principle with drugs is you need more of the same thing to get the same result. So if somebody told you, great job today, kind of what you're expecting tomorrow is that somebody's telling you, you did even better today, and then you're happy. Every day you're doing everything well, that becomes your new baseline. We get used to good things very easily, and then it's our new baseline of how we feel. That's why there's research. Maybe I could ask you this. Who here, if you have the choice between winning the lottery today, and let's give you guys earn a lot of money, so let's say you get 10 million, otherwise you won't be incentivized. Okay, with some other groups you can make lower amounts, but I think for you, I need to adapt. And then either you win the lottery today and you get these 10 millions, which I think could be nice, or you have an accident today and you will be paralyzed for life. Who goes for the 10 million? Please put your arms up. Who rather prefers the accident? Nobody, obviously. I would do the same thing. I would rather take the money. There was actually a researcher who studied people who went through these life events, and Daniel Gilbert from Harvard, he's a happiness expert, really good research on this topic. And what he found is that 1 year after the incident, people were back to their original happiness level. So whether you become paralyzed or have 10 million won't really make a difference in your life. But another thing he found is what makes a difference in your life is the quality of your social relationships. But that's not the point here. What I wanted to say is, do you get used to good things? You also get used to bad things. But after a while, once you have the 10 million, and then you move to a new neighborhood and you build a swimming pool and you send your kids to American Harvard, Yale education, suddenly all your neighbors do the same. You compare yourself to these neighbors and it becomes your new normal. So a little bit we need to take into account that the reward circuit is pleasant, but it's gone quickly. You get used to good stuff, which doesn't mean that you have to avoid it, just that you should know that when you give feedback to people and you create a positive environment, suddenly this becomes the new baseline for you as a leader. I promised you that there are two states we're going to talk about. This is the reward circuit, but there's also in the brain the threat circuit. I think it's pretty obvious from the word. That's when you make negative experience. That's what you will see when you meet people you don't like. I don't know, your parents-in-law are coming over the weekend, or I don't know, whatever kind of negative encounters you might have. Or you, I don't know, this can be social situations, you get negative feedback, you have a stressful client interaction, something doesn't go well for you, and it can even be, I don't know, you are in this car accident we talk about, this puts you in a threat situation. In a threat situation, the counterpart of this nucleus accumbens would be the amygdala. It has been very popular even in the press for late years, lots of research on the amygdala. And what will happen is that cortisol will be put into your blood flow, and that's this negative stress hormone will go into your blood. And the thing is with threat, it basically stays a lot longer. Dopamine is released in your brain and you get a little kick out of it and you're happy for 10 minutes and then you focus on something else. Threat, one negative person in the morning who really puts you in a bad mood and you might stay in that mood all day long. Why is that so? Between reward and threat, there's one thing I would like for you to keep in mind, and it's very simple. 9-to-1, the so-called negativity bias. The brain does not treat positive stimuli and negative stimuli equally. We process negative experiences 9 times more strongly than positive experiences. So imagine you have a feedback situation, you tell the person in your team 9 wonderful things this person does and would say, oh, this little thing you could improve. And 1 year later you talk to the person, you will see that obviously he or she will remember that one negative thing and maybe some of the positive things you said, but I think one researcher, he said, positive information is like Teflon on the brain. It comes and goes, but negative information is like Velcro. You know, it sticks to you, the material that is that sticky material that will stay on your brain forever. I think it's a good analogy. So when you interact with people, it's so much more easy to put them in a bad mood than to make them happy. But then positive things, it's a drug circuit, so you need more of the same to get the same effect, and negative experience might stick forever. Why do you think that's like that? Isn't that a little bit stupid to be so biased? Yeah? Survival. Your ancestors, imagine you meet the tiger in the forest, or tigers don't live in forests, but something like that, and you meet it once and it tries to eat you, and then you meet it again, and you're thinking, oh, let's give him a second chance, Let's see if he's nicer today. He maybe was hungry last time. He could have just eaten, and then you're gone. So when we make one negative experience, it's actually helpful to stay away from these negative things. And we also do a lot of work, and there's lots of research on learning. Let's say the strongest learning impact in the brain on negative experiences. You put your hand on the hot stove once, never do it again. It's aversive conditioning, and it even works. You watch somebody else make a negative experience, and easily the entire group picks that up. And for positive experience, people usually make that experience themselves, and they learn from that. You see somebody else eat chocolate. This doesn't mean that everybody here will go and eat chocolate, but you see somebody of you being eaten up by a snake that somehow was coming to the hotel, everybody will go away. There's not a few people who say, oh, I don't like snakes. Negative experience also spread very easily in groups. It's just something about the basic functioning of the brain I'd like to share. I think we can all relate to this from our experience. Now, the important thing is a little bit research. Often when you read the popular newspapers and there's an article about the brain, it will always be about parts of the brain where certain things are located. It's always a little picture, and then you see here is the self, and here is pain process, and here is the mathematical skills. But one important thing in the brain is the interplay of parts of the brain. And there's lots of researchers who look at how information is processed and from where it's flowing, and this makes a difference. And what researchers found is that between the prefrontal cortex for rational processing and the limbic system, there's lots and lots and lots of connections, and these connections are fast. So whatever happens here will influence what happens there and the other way around. But the influence from the limbic system is stronger. And there's two things that have been really scientifically proven lately, and there's no doubt about it. When people are in a reward state, dopamine is released, and this will have a very positive impact on the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. So people who are in a good mood and are feeling well will perform better. Obviously, you take a stupid person, put that person in a good mood, that won't help your performance. It's based on your personal potential, okay? I'm not saying it makes you smarter. I'm just saying based on what you got, it makes you function better. And the sad thing is that when people are in a threat mode, and very often people at work are in a threat mode because there's lots of unpleasant, stressful situations. Once you're in threat, your prefrontal cortex shuts off. Why is that so? In a threat situation, we have a mechanism that I think you all have heard about, fight or flight or freeze. When you're in a dangerous situation, it's important to make quick decisions. You don't want to think of 10 different solutions of escaping a tiger. You just run, okay? And social situations kick off our threat circuit. But they are not really a danger to our life, but we experience them. Our brain processes them just as if somebody is about to kill you. You can experience a bad relationship like a threat. And then your brain will disactivate the prefrontal cortex, thinking you better need to run away or to fight or to hide. And you won't have access to your full mental power anymore. And that's something that you don't need when you have a team of people who works for you. You want them to perform well. And very often circumstances make that people go into threat. And today we're going to talk about how to get people out of threat and into reward state. Do we all agree that reward is good for performance, or have you seen differently in the past? Because I would move on to that model before we all agree on that, because maybe you say, oh, it's nice, this coaching lady tells us something, people should feel good at work. Yeah, but actually have a deadline. I better pressure my team so they get it done. So are you doing this with your teams, or do you think it's sometimes good to stress them and they deliver better?
Let's assume it's good. Tell us about it.
Assume it's not for me, it's not enough.
Certain people will perform better if there's some element of threat.
Some certain things, I've repeated for everybody, certain people will perform better when there's an element of threat. And I think it's very important that you're saying that. And there's, I don't want to go out of the session of you thinking, now let's create this fuzzy environment of smiley, and I come up with cake to my team every morning and flowers, and then I say, oh, and get the work done, but be happy while you do it. That's not very realistic. And also in what you're saying, there's a neuropsychological truth. And I think I would like to show you a little bit how people react, how they're, let's reframe it, how there are individual differences of what puts people into threat or not. because I think you guys can handle it. I show you one different model, and then I show you the solution of how to get people into reward, because not everybody is the same. We all have a reward and a threat system, but what is the threat for one person can be somebody else's reward. And I would like to differentiate for you guys, because otherwise you might think, yeah, it's good for some people to be in reward, but I know my team actually needs the stress and the pressure, and that's why I will give it to them. You might even be right in that situation.
Or sometimes you have a feeling that I actually need a lot of pressure to really do something.
Yeah.
I sort of have a tendency to, I do things in the last minute.
Yes.
But I know that I can.
Yes, and then you do it in the last minute. Yeah.
Classic essay crisis
Yeah.
situation, isn't it? That essays get written very close to the deadline.
Yeah, like an hour before, a day before. Yeah. Yeah, you prepared the night before. Yes. I think that's a very good point. And I showed you one model because there is a regularity to this. And I think when you have that, it will be very easy for you to recognize who needs what. Let's take a look at this. What we have here, it's called arousal. From a neuroscientific point of view, arousal is how activated is your central nervous system. Here you're in a coma sleep, and here you're close to panic attack. And in between there are many stages of activation. And here we have performance, but again, we are not talking about how well you're doing at your job. We are talking about, based on your individual potential, how well is your prefrontal cortex functioning at this given moment. This is a no-brainer. The moment you wake up in the morning, you didn't have coffee yet, and it's just too early for you, and you're not fully awake, your performance will be somewhere down here. And then maybe you have some interesting meetings, phone calls, some interesting tasks and challenges come up, and somehow your performance will go up. Maybe you get to present in front of your client, it's your key account, and you've really been working hard on this, and you have teams that have been collected numbers for this for a long time. You finally get to present, and you know lots of important people will be there, and you're perfectly prepared. This might put you in the situation of peak performance. You're standing in front of the audience, you're talking, and you're really in what researchers call flow. That's a brain state where you're losing concept of time, you're fully present, and you enjoy what you do, and you're really at your best possible performance. Think of a piano player like Lang Lang. He's giving a concert. He's fully absorbed into the music. He's not thinking of something else. That's a moment of flow, or we can even call it peak performance. And that's what, we're not saying you should be in that stage all day long, but if you never get to experience it, something is wrong in your job. Obviously, you would want to be yourself, and for the people on your team to have this experience as often as possible, because that's where really performance is happening. And then imagine there's I don't know, before your wonderful meeting, you get a call and the associate in a team says, I'm sorry, I messed up, there's 5 million missing, I don't know where in the Excel model it is, something is wrong, you're just about to present wrong data, or your client is sitting there and he looks really angry because he wasn't happy with the performance of your team, and he will talk to, I guess PwC is not doing so well at the moment, but he's talking to your competitors, okay, and he's considering changing accounts to somebody else, and you know this. So this might put you over the edge. You don't have the right data, your client is unsatisfied, and he is about to discover it. This moment, you might start to sweat and sit in that meeting and not really be able to fully concentrate. It will put you out of your performance zone. And I think we all have been there. Here, you have a stage, we call that under arousal. You're doing your job, but you're doing standard operation procedures. Somebody could call, wake you up at night, and you just do the stuff and ask you something. You'd like, do like this, blah, 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 but it's not really exciting. Some people spend all their working day in that stage. They are under challenged. Or you're here, so you're constantly firefighting, constantly running behind, constantly too much stress and pressure, and never really in line with your skills and your challenge. And then we go into what is called over-arousal. And when people over a prolonged period of time, I'm not talking about sometimes, we all can be there and there's no problem, it's normal. But when you over a longer period of time constantly work under over-arousal, people will go into burnout and depression because it depletes the serotonin resources in your brain, and it makes your amygdala grow, the part of the brain for the threat center, and it makes it more and more sensitive. So you will see threat even where there is none. These people are very sensitive. You criticize a small thing and they blow up because the amygdala grows in size and will actually pick up everything that's negative. So rather than having a 9-to-1 bias, you will get a 30-to-1 bias, or even stronger, because this 9-to-1 is an average, and a healthy person has a 9-to-1 negativity bias. The more you go into burnout, the more negative you will become. And it's a way of your brain to look for all potential danger you could encounter so you can defend yourself. I think this is a model that has been found 100 years ago. What's new to it are a few findings around it that could actually define what are the things that will put you into flow. There are 3 substances from a neuroscientific perspective. You tell me then if you want to know all this stuff or if it's too much. First thing is, to get into flow, you need noradrenaline. What is noradrenaline? It's a positive stress hormone. That's what's released when you have a challenge. That's what you're saying. You need a certain deadline or pressure to get things done. There needs to be some kind of excitement, or competition can trigger people. So it's some kind of challenge. Some people need more of it, some less, but we all need a certain extent of challenge to perform well. If, say, Lang, he plays the same song every day on the piano, after a while he will play it with a part of his brain that's called the basal ganglia, where our experience is stored. He can do it in his sleep, and he will not improve, but even he wants to improve. So he needs to play pieces that are more and more difficult in order to develop himself and still enjoy what he's doing. Second factor is dopamine. We talked about dopamine before. It's part of the reward system. And dopamine means you're having fun. If you don't have fun while you work, you're not in your peak performance zone. If you're bored out or stressed out and not having joy, you're not at your highest possible performance. So actually having fun at work is a sign of high performance. From an individual perspective, obviously, somebody who's having fun but is not very good at his job will not be a great asset to your team unless he puts the other people in a good mood, and then they perform better. But from individual perspective, people in a good mood perform better compared to their depressed self. Third substance, and that's one we see more and more missing. People lose this capacity more and more. Acetylcholine. That's the substance, the neurotransmitter your brain releases when you're in a situation of focused attention, prolonged focused attention. It means if you're looking at your BlackBerry while you're doing something, you're not performing well. If you're multitasking, it's not possible to get into flow. If Lang gives a concert and then in the middle of the Rhapsody number 17, he checks his email, it will put him out of that flow state. So prolonged focused attention. And if you look at children, they can get totally absorbed in play. They're in flow while they're busy looking at something. They're fully focused. And very often, people in today's organizations are pushed into work mode that doesn't allow them to access flow anymore because they are expected to do many things at once rather than focusing on one task at hand. So this is just a little idea of what happens in the brain under peak performance. Here comes the thing. And here the individual difference come into. Those in the back, I have no idea if you can see what I'm doing here. I really hope so. Here, some people are here, okay? Just a little change of plans and they're out of performance because it stresses them out, or they don't need much going on in order to get into flow. For them, a deadline can be, it will happen in 3 weeks. What you do 10 minutes before your deadline, this person will do 3 weeks and will feel, oh, good, I managed it, because in 3 weeks is my presentation. So might be the presentation can be as good as yours, but this person will get it done 3 weeks before, okay? And then you have people who are here. These people are flying between Tokyo and Los Angeles during the week, and then the weekend they run a marathon or go rock climbing. It's a little bit, these people are always active, always doing something, always on the discovery of things. And I think we all know somebody like this. Scientists love to study these people because they really have a different brain than the average population. And they're called sensation seekers. And what you can see here is actually a mutation in the dopamine receptors of these people. They need more external stimulation to release dopamine, so a lot of things can go on to activate them. They get bored easily. You need to give them new challenges, new things all the time, send them on a job rotation, give them new challenge, tell them, oh, rather than in a week, your deadline is tomorrow, to get them working. And I used to work for McKinsey in the past, and while I spent my weekend sleeping and relaxing from this awful work week, my colleagues would run marathons and do crazy things over the weekend, because most of them who seek jobs like this, where you really go on a constant challenge, are sensation seekers, or they're even called dopamine junkies. And it's an addiction. That's workaholics very often come from that category. I think we all get clear pictures of these ideas. I imagine that there are quite some sensation seekers in this group. That would be my hypothesis. So here you have the classical consultants, investment bankers, and people like, you know, this guy who jumped from, what's his name again? This guy who, Felix Baumgartner guy, this kind of extreme sports people who love the challenge. What kind of professions, where do you see these people? Sorry? Doing processes, okay. So having really track of maybe in a change process being the head of the PMO who really has control over who does what and really tracks things. Just a few ideas. People who do the same thing every day, like a routine, they don't get bored. My mother, she's a doctor. She will go to the same of an eye doctor. It's very limited. You know, in the end, you only look people in the eyes and they always have the same problems. She loves her job, done it for many years, and doesn't get bored. And she's not like she's saying, oh, I've done this. Let's do it different on this patient today. Let's make a little experiment. No, she will do it the same way, and she even enjoys it. Good for her patients, I would say. Here we can find doctors. Here we can find Nobel Prize winners in research. Think of Rizzolatti sitting in this lab with the monkeys every day, and you have no idea how many hours of recording the same stuff. You need 4 years to get data from one monkey. You need to train him for 2 years to do a certain task before. It's very, you really have to have sustainable interest in the topic. Think of best-selling authors. These people would have loved to publish a book. Their name on a book, they go to holiday and they write 2 pages and then they have it in their drawer and always think next holiday I pick it up and finish it. Somehow never happens because they learn stand-up paddling instead or something. So, you know, these people are always doing new things. They don't always stick through with longer tasks. These people get it done. They can write 5 years on a novel and rewrite it until it's perfect. Important, I think, very often, and your group has been very nice. Sometimes when I ask people about professions, they give me cleaning lady, nurses, kindergarten teachers, and they give it with a little like, we are here, we are the high performer, and this is for people who do boring, low-level tasks. That's not true. The intelligence level here does not differ. Research shows us that there are equally intelligent people as a normal distribution, and in all of these groups, you have the same level of intelligence. It's just that the environment people need to perform and the kind of task they excel at are different. And when you talk about diverse teams and working in teams, and maybe you have different tasks, or in a process you have different stages where you need different people, you should know about this and know that while this person in a certain situation is already in threat because stressed out. This person is still bored and not at their full performance. So some people you need to pressure them and challenge them so they get something done. And other people you need to take the pressure out, and then they will perform at their best.
Any research that would talk about the culture of an organization, so do these things become self-fulfilling? So if you have an organization that is full of people on the right, then you hire people like that?
Yes.
And therefore you never get anything done because people are strategizing all the time, you haven't got any people to do stuff.
What research shows is that actually the people at the top decide the company culture. In many organizations, I see we work for multinational companies like yours. You're like a typical client of us. And in these organizations, men are at the top. Interestingly enough, being a man pushes you to the right. Being a woman usually pushes you more to the left because women are more risk. I'm pregnant and have a baby at home. How likely am I to do dangerous, crazy things while I'm here to explore? Zero, okay? No interest at all. And there's an evolutionary point. Being a woman puts you to the left. Going with age, we're also going to the left. And very often, people here to the right, they have a very active testosterone system and dopamine system. When these two substances come together, then you get a sensation seeker, okay? Very often, there are also women who fall in this category, and it's totally healthy. High-performing women, there's nothing wrong with them. But not so many women come into that category. Very often, women in your position are the ones that thrive under challenge, and they can persist under these situations, and they know how to do it. And the average population would never be competitive enough and be even willing to become a partner at EY because they say, why all this hassle, too much working? I'd rather open up my own little, I don't know what's it called, little accounting studio somewhere. I take in my little clients and I go home at 5. Okay, that's perfectly fine and might make a person here very happy. They just don't see the point of going through all this. It's a lot of hard work to get to where you are. So once people are at the top, they design the climate for the people around them based on their own needs because they think, I thrive well under pressure. Let's put my team in a good situation. It's not a bad intention behind it, but you create a climate that's good for the people around you. And very often the CEO, the board are people like this, and they will create a company culture that is good for these people and not so good for those. So very often we also see that there's a little bit, when I worked in consulting, I know there was a lot of, I know this one partner lady, she was like, oh, I have this one person in my team. He sleeps under the desk, he needs breaks. We can't have a person like this on the team. Why not? You know, let him take his breaks as long as he gets his job done. If the others don't need a break, let them not have a break. There's a need to have a little bit more flexibility and not judge people so quickly because they have different working modalities. And I have a colleague who's like this, working like this, like crazy all the time and flying constantly around. We work, I would say 90% of the time together. It works because I send him my stuff 3 weeks before and I say, here's our presentation. That's what I plan to do, okay? And then the night before, he takes it, he totally changes this, he puts some magic stuff in it. I wake up the next morning relaxed. He doesn't push me to do anything the night before because I like to sleep. And then I wake up and I have a wonderful little surprise, but I know I can trust him that it will be in line with what I did before. So he's happy he can do his last minute stuff. I'm happy I am prepared 3 weeks before. Both perfectly working well together, and it's not that he's the high performer and I'm the low performer in our group. We're working very well together. And his creativity in the last minute is something that really adds to what I prepared before. So you need to find ways to communicate. And when we work with that model practically, and there's something you can do with your teams. First of all, self-insight, self-awareness. If you look at this, you will easily get a grasp of where you might be. It's very intuitive, this model. I think we can all relate to it. So you don't need to be a psychologist and take scientific tests and urine samples to know where you are on the curve. Look at it and you get an idea where people are, and people can rate themselves easily, I think, depending on their needs. And then you can think, what kind of task will put me first of all, what kind of environment do I need to perform well, but what kind of situations put me in over-arousal, which time of situations put me in under-arousal. And then you can have a talk around this and avoid these situations that are negative for people. And it actually does work to change it around if you're just flexible. Sorry? Mm-hmm. I have two things to say. Your colleague, if you're all here, is talking about the fact that as a partner, you have to stretch out. You actually have to learn to behave like this. Otherwise, you're not successful as a partner. Two things. First of all, you will never change who you are. Some people are to the left. They will be you. They can train them, send them to Harvard, to wherever, give them personal coaching. There will never be that person here. And it's no point. It's not the best use to put them in there. But with time and experience, and if you're very much to the left, maybe you shouldn't become partners. You will be so much happier somewhere else where you don't have to camouflage yourself like a chameleon and try to fit in when you don't. Some things you just choose your environment and you opt out of things that are not good for you. But that's not always saying if you're to the left, you will never be to the right. But there's one thing that helps you with time and experience. I didn't show you a brain part that's very important. We have the rational processing, we have the limbic system. With time, we will feed into a system that's called the basal ganglia. That's a system where all your experience goes. The first time you learn how to drive a car, you do it with your prefrontal cortex. You have to think about what you do. You think, I have to push this button, and with my right leg I do this, and you can't talk to anybody while you're doing it because you're fully concentrating with all your attention on driving. After a while, after you've driven 1,000 miles, you drive with your basal ganglia. You can talk on the phone while you drive. You can eat while you drive, at least you think so. You can listen to music while you drive. You can do lots of things while you drive because you're not driving with the prefrontal cortex anymore. You're driving with your basal ganglia. After certain years in the business, you have lots of experience in here. You will be able to perform a lot of tasks that your younger colleagues are performing with their prefrontal cortex. You do it with your basal ganglia. That's what being an expert means. That's what experience means. So under pressure, your prefrontal cortex might be knocked out. You're stressed, but your basal ganglia kick in, and they do the job so much better. There's actually research that shows that experts perform better under pressure because their basal ganglia, they have some kind of intuition, intuitive wisdom. So you take better intuitive decisions when you're an expert. Rather than thinking too much, you should take a quick gut decision, and it will be a better quality than if you were thinking too long. But you might have young people on your team. They don't have all that knowledge in here. You put them under stress, they will try to perform with their prefrontal cortex. There's nothing in here or just the wrong stuff, and they will do whatever. And there are organizations where people are working under constant threat. Like, think the military, think fire patrol people, emergency doctors. What do these organizations do? They train and train and train people to death. It's called overlearning in scientific terms. They make sure everybody has the same standard operation procedures in the basal ganglia. The moment your enemy comes, you pull out your gun and you shoot in one certain way. You don't need 20 creative ways to shoot your enemy. You have one way of how you do it and you get it done. Doesn't matter if your prefrontal cortex is still on or not. You do it with your basal ganglia. In milliseconds, you take decisions. When you're more experienced, it might seem to other people that you're more to the right, but it's actually just the fact that things don't stress you as much anymore because you know you have that experience in your basal ganglia, and you don't need to involve your prefrontal cortex as much anymore. But you might be acting under arousal. You do it under your experience and you solve that situation quickly. That's something people have to learn, but you will never move somebody from the left to the right. It's just that when you have more experience in your basal ganglia, it will appear that you moved to the right, but you didn't. Does that help you in your question? Yeah. So with time, you will never change somebody. You shouldn't even try it, because you can do psychological testing around this, and this is stable over life. People rather move to the left with age. Yesterday, I know we moved the session after lunch for half an hour, and all of you guys, at least I had people in my session, and they survived that change without being totally stressed out. Oh, half an hour later, what will you do? You know, do this in an older people's home and move their lunch for half an hour, and people will go crazy, and you really will see that the older you get, the less testosterone system activity you have, the less dopamine is produced, and people get less flexible with age. The only thing that saves you is your experience. So if you've done things a million times before, even if your client is a little bit difficult, you've seen 100 different difficult clients before. So it's like, oh, whatever, it will solve itself. It won't kill me to deal with that person. And you're cool in that situation. But a young, not so experienced person might go into threat, and you should take this into account, that when people don't have so much in here in the basal ganglia, they are more easily going into threat.
Is there a difference if those threats or challenges are externally generated or self-generated?
Yes. The number one prevention of stress is a concept called a locus of control. When you feel that you are master of the situation, when you have something that's called perceived control, things don't stress you anymore. It can be an external thing, but when you think you can influence it, it can be solved. It doesn't stress you. We will get to that point later when we talk about autonomy. When you perceive yourself as a victim, and some people, then obviously you will be stressed out by everything. And some people have a more internal locus of control, so whenever they're in a difficult situation, they think, what can I do? How can I change it? How will I solve it? And other people are like, poor me. Oh my God, it's happening to me again. Oh, I'm always unlucky. Oh, now things are going badly. And there's, that's something actually you can influence. Lots of therapy, and I'm not saying psychotherapy always works, but there's one therapy that's based on this idea of changing people's locus of control, as an example in depression, so they don't see themselves as a victim, they get more active. Another thing to your question, you asked about self-created stress. For the brain, it doesn't matter if there is really a bad situation or not. It's enough that you perceive it as a bad situation. So some people create their own threat. Wonderful environment, happy family, wonderful job. Everything's great, but they're always unhappy because they are always thinking negatively about things. This 9-to-1 bias obviously is an average. There's a normal distribution over it. Some people are just seeing negative things everywhere, and you can see in these people, the amygdala is bigger, and they might have made bad experiences in the past, or there's even a genetic predisposition to it, and you see bad things wherever. I may look around here. I can't see half of you guys because of the light, but you know, he's taking a critical look at me, and I could be constantly nervous because he's giving me these critical looks. And it could be totally putting me here sweating and shivering, thinking, I don't care, he can look like this, you know, I don't even see him, I have the lights. So some people are like this, and it doesn't matter if there's a real threat or an imagined threat, the effect on the brain is the same. So I think I'd like to put you people into practice, into doing something with each other, applying some of these learning to EY. I'll give you one model as a substitute for the Maslow model, and I would like for you to work with that model afterwards. And I show you, it's a little bit about putting people out of threat and into reward, and it's a social model. It's based on social cognitive neuroscience, so it's taking account the fact that social needs are at the very basis. So it's about things you can do in social situations and social relationships with your clients, with your teams, with yourself when you're feeling badly, or with your family at home. Whenever there's more than one person in the room, you can use this model to improve relationships and put people into reward. I'll give it to you, it's 6 factors, and then we will work with that model. So it's a model to minimize threat, maximize reward. And you can even use it as a diagnostic tool. Let's say you are having a relationship with a client and somehow it just doesn't work out. You don't connect. Something is wrong. You feel you will never be successful at this client. You can go through these 6 factors one by one and think, what could it be that puts me off with that person? The model has a funny name. It's called Freaks, but I think it's easy to remember. And each of these factors you can target individual. It's a different way of looking at people's needs. Let's start with the E, energy. We talked about mirror neurons before. When you meet a person, you will instantly pick up this person's mood. And some people just suck your energy, right? You don't want to be with them because somehow you feel like, just leave me alone, get rid. You're thinking, oh, my plane is leaving, I have to go. You're always finding excuses. I have a deadline, I need to make this call, see you. You just somehow don't want to be with these people I'm putting. But obviously, before we even go into a social situation, we are pre-influenced. If you're unhappy, there's a high chance people don't want to be around you. That's why depressed people become so isolated, because yes, they don't enjoy company, but also nobody wants to be with them. You will spread this negative energy. So a lot of what's happened before you encounter a social setting will make a difference. Let's say your soccer team won yesterday evening. You will be high in testosterone, high in dopamine, and you will go into a meeting full of energy and positive attitude of can do, let's do this together. You know, if your wife left you yesterday, then obviously you will go into the meeting in a different mood. And these things we pick up instantly before we even start talking to people, and they will influence. So it's a little bit when you have a problem with somebody, you can also think the problem could be outside your relationship. Doesn't always have to do something with you. It could be that this person has a strong negativity bias or something. So this factor is a little bit about the energy somebody brings into the room, or the energy you as a leader bring into the room when you interact with people. Next factor, ranks. And now you might think this is about the fancy watch and the big car and the higher bonus. Yes and no. But from a leadership perspective, this is about how do people feel after they interacted with you? Do they feel more important, more valued, more appreciated, or do they feel unimportant and like it doesn't matter to you if they are there or not? It's about, I don't know, you have a person from your team, you call in this person for a feedback situation, and while you ask that person to wait in the corner, you check your emails, you make a few calls, and then you're like, oh, oops, only 5 minutes left. Yeah, we can do it quickly. Let's take a look at your evaluation. Yeah, good job, great. Keep on the good work, bye. How will that person feel afterwards? Not very important, not as if this person is making a difference to you. And from an evolutionary perspective, we are wired to think in hierarchies. People want to feel important. They want to be an important part of the group. And you can either give them that feeling that they make a difference, or you can treat them in the way that they always feel that they're somehow inferior to you. Salespeople use this factor often in a very manipulative way. They look at your credit card and they say your name 1,000 times, or call centers people are trained to say your name every 30 seconds. Obviously, when you exaggerate and don't do it in a truthful way, but in a way to pretend that somebody's important to you, mirror neurons kick in, and people will sense that you're being just this kind of guy who comes in cheerful, but you know it's not meant. Obviously, with this model, it only works when you really walk the talk, do it from your heart. This is not about pretending to like people when you don't. Okay? But it's about people want to feel important, and do you make them feel important, or do you devaluate them? Safety. Our brain is constantly trying to anticipate the future. That's what our brain is doing. Constantly thinking what will come up next, because this, based on the activity of our limbic system, our brain is deriving conclusions about the future. Does this person make me feel good? Okay, somebody I'm safe with. or not. Safety is a lot about trying to predict the future. We often see this in change situations. Everybody's insecure. Will I have my job next year? This put people in a very insecure situation. And we once had a program where we taught people how to fire large groups of people. Nothing I would recommend to do, but sometimes you have that situation. You need to really get rid of 20% of the people in the company or something like this. Obviously, there's a certain way to do it better or not. It doesn't help to sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's okay, it's nothing bad is happening, and then suddenly you get rid of these people. People can handle the truth, so you can give it to them. And when you don't have content safety, when you can't really tell people what's happening, sometimes for legal reasons you can't tell them, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, you can give them process safety. So this is about the way how you handle information, whether you give people a clear path so they know what to expect in the future from you, or whether you confuse people. You give them a feedback that is okay, but they don't know, will I make partner? Yes or no? Will I continue at EY? Will I be successful? Yes or no? People very often, when you give them feedback, they don't want to hear all the details. They want to know, am I doing a good job? Are you happy with me? Yes or no? So how clear are you in your communication with the people around you? It will make people feel a lot safer when you're transparent and clear and honest and give them a process clarity going forward. We talked about this factor, coming back to your question about the self-made threat or the external threat, autonomy. It's the #1 protection factor for stress. There was research where they looked at entrepreneurs and they asked the entrepreneurs, why do you want to build your own company? What's the point? And they say, I want to work less, spend more time with my family, spend the weekends in Spain at my family holiday house. I want to have a better work-life balance. They have all these dreams about it. And they measured people's cortisol level for stress before they started the new company. And they looked at the people who still survived 5 years later, who still had their own company, and they looked at the number of hours they worked and their cortisol level. They worked more, less stressed. Because when it's your client at stage and you work until 3 a.m. to prepare that pitch, it's because you chose to do so. You decided to do so. It doesn't stress you as much as when your boss tells you, you stay up until 3 and you finish that presentation. So it's a lot about giving people choice, not micromanaging too much, giving people, as an example, the autonomy to work in a style that fits their need on the curve, allow personal freedom wherever you can, to not put people into some kind of corset where they feel that you dictate what they do. We all have a need for autonomy, some people more than others. Obviously, there's also individual differences in this model. Here, I show you a real brain. See if this works. Here we go. Take a look. I don't know if I have a laser thing in here. I doubt I do. But I show you to the left. You can see, let's say if a neuroscientist looked at this picture, he would say this is a person whose arm has been cut off. Okay, this is somebody who's been tortured in the brain scanner, a person in pain. To the left, you see the anterior cingulate cortex. That's the part of the brain that's activated when you experience physical pain coming from your body. This signal is processed. And to the right, you see an activity in the right ventral prefrontal cortex. That's a part of the brain that's active when we try to cope with the pain. So when we're in pain, physical pain, we have the pain being processed from the body, and we are thinking of ways to get out of the situation, to suppress it, to think of something else, to think of ways to get out of it. Would be very unethical to make an experiment like this. Instead, well, and you could now say it's also unethical, but I let you judge yourself. What they did is they asked people to join for a game of sports. So you would lay in the brain scanner. On top you have a screen. You have a little joystick and you get to play a game of cyberball. Cyberball is 3 people are playing. It's a little bit like basketball. You toss a ball to each other and you play together. It's a social game. And the first 10 minutes, it's really fun. You play with your 2 other antagonists, and you play balls back and forth, and you get better because with the joystick somehow you learn to handle it. After 10 minutes in this setup, suddenly the two other people are starting to toss the balls between each other, and they ignore you. You're somehow always jumping behind, always trying to catch the ball, but then somebody else catches it right before you. This was the setup for a setting of social exclusion. They simulated a situation where you're left out of the group. And even though you have only played with these people for 10 minutes, this idea of suddenly being excluded creates an effect in your brain that is similar to physical pain. So what you can now see in neuroscience is this notion that physical pain has the same impact in the brain like social pain. And you can see that it's as painful to have bad social relationships, to be excluded. I don't know, in a work context, we're talking about the fact of connection here. Do people work well together? Is everybody invited to the Christmas party, or do you leave the assistants out? I don't know. You know, in some companies it's like this or like that. Is everybody in the email or somebody missing in the CC? And why does, you know, how does the person feel when he realized there's an entire process going on and he wasn't involved? People used to survive in small groups, and when you're excluded from the group, it probably means you will be dead very soon because nobody survives on their own. So we experience situations where we're not part of a group and where people are not friendly to us really as a threat to our survival. So it's this is about building good relationships with people. Do you know the family situations of the people you work with? Do you create an inclusive climate for new people? Maybe you guys have worked with one team for 10 years and you've always worked well together. Now you have a new person coming into this team. Do you welcome that person and make it feel part of the team? This is about building great relationships. One last factor, and then I put you to work, so you also get to do something today. Let's see, who can we play with today? You guys are sitting in the front. Yes, too late. I give you €100. Imagine, huh? I'm not. And you get to share it with Christopher here. What's your name? David. David gets €100. He gets to share with you, and you give him as much as you think is appropriate. If he refuses your offer, all the money goes back to me, and then we'll play again. So that's a setup. You both know the rules. Please make him an offer. 50. Christopher, how do you feel about the €50?
Yeah, pretty good.
You take it?
Yeah.
Sure? Yeah. Okay. €50, that's not bad. He didn't do anything. Do you do like this with your bonus? When you get it, just give it to all your colleagues?
I haven't had one position on that.
How would you have felt with €1?
I would have entered into a discussion.
You would have negotiated. Yeah, but you can only say yes or no. Would you have taken it? Free money, didn't have to work a second for it, and he's refusing the money. That's a little bit absurd from economical perspective. And 2 psychologists won the Nobel Prize for this setup because that's what they found. When the amount was under €20 in this case, people would refuse amounts. They would refuse free money. And when you look at all the economic theories, they are based on the assumption of the homo economicus. People maximize profit. When there's free money, if there's €1 laying here on the floor, I think I would pick it up and take it, right? Don't have to do anything. But in these social situations, people rather not get any money at all than to get an unfair deal. And these researchers, Kahneman and Tversky, they found that we are rather the homo reciprocans. We maximize relationships and fairness. People would sometimes even pay money to punish an unfair person in these situations. So this is about fairness. And it doesn't really matter if a situation is fair or not. It's about perceived fairness. When your bonus system is perceived as unfair, when the way you treat different people in your team is perceived as unfair, it will put people into a very strong threat reaction. And just maybe one little funny information for you guys here, and then we put this. They have done a lot of research on this ultimatum game, as it's called lately, even in the brain scanner. And in one setup, they sprayed a substance called oxytocin into people's nose. Oxytocin is a substance that's released when you have great relationships, when you fall in love, when you bond with people. It's a neurohormone. It's released after birth to bond with your baby, as an example, or when people fall in love. But even in normal situations, when we shake hand and touch, oxytocin is released, or when you hug. So it's a very powerful substance in our brain. You can spray it up your nose, and then for 10 minutes you have the impact of being high on oxytocin, just as if you just fell in love. And
How do you get hold of it?
you can get it in the pharmacy, but you need a doctor who prescribes it for you. And it's also, you can't do it, as an example, we couldn't distribute it here in the room through this air conditioning. You need to spray it right up the nose. So you need to be, if you want to influence somebody, you first need to get very close. Yes. So if David had oxytocin in his nose, what do you think he would have done? Give more money. And that's what happens. When people are high on oxytocin, they just give it away. And when people high on oxytocin get an unfair deal, it's like, it's okay, David needs that money. I let him do this. It's with your family, think about it. You might think not share your bonus with your colleagues, but you share it with your family, and you don't count the hours your wife was dishwashing for every euro you give her, right?
We're not meant to do that.
Some people might do that, but you don't. You know, if my child wants something, I give it to her, and I don't count what she did for me and what I did back. We are not so nitty-gritty. When we have good relationships, somehow this concept of fairness changes into a concept where we're more generous with each other. So actually, if you have great connections, negotiation situations will be a lot easier with your clients because they won't count every cent. Yes?
You're saying if you give someone a rubbish bonus, you should give them a hug first, that hug?
Think in that situation. I mean, the overall, maybe not in that setup, first a hug, then a bonus, but if you have great climate to work in and people feel valued, they won't demand as much money. When people ask for money, it's never about the money, at least not in our society where I would say all of you have enough money. Let me make the judgment for you. You all look like you have enough to eat and drink and clothes and everything's taken care of. When people ask for more money, it's about ranks, more recognition, it's about fairness, it's never about the money. When people want more money, it's because they feel that what they're doing should be valued. So the money is more like a symbol for what you're worth in the company. So it's important to get the money right. I'm not saying money is not important, but when people ask for money, they never ask for the money, they ask for fairness. I'd like to give you a little exercise now. We have until 10:30 in this session. I would like to put you at work for 20 minutes in small groups. I tell you what to do in a second, and then we will debrief together. What you will do, you can take the freaks model and analyze it with regard to your work environment. So you as a partner at EY, what are the threats in your environment? What are the rewards? Be specific. You can discuss it. You see you're sitting, can you see that you're sitting in small groups with the chairs? Find yourself 5, 6, or 3 colleagues. It doesn't matter how many groups you are, so you're comfortable. And then think, how can you use the freaks model for yourself and the partner group? What would freak you as a partner? What would put you into more reward mode or in interaction with your peers? Second, you could think about your teams, how you can apply this to create a better work environment for your teams. Or third, think about your clients. You know, how can you put this to work with them? You can think of specific client situations. You can, as a result of this, I don't want a 5-minute presentation. You work for 20 minutes, ignore the numbers here. I know it must be difficult for you that always focus on the numbers. The numbers here don't work. We'd like to just have some key insights from each group, because we're too many. If we present, we get all weird. You know, we don't want to hear 20 stories. We want to have 1 minute from each group with some key insights, with some examples, with some fresh ideas. Get started. I think if we're done at 20 after, that's good. Just get started. You have something to write and discuss. And you can make a decision to only focus on your teams or your clients or yourself. Be flexible with that instruction and make the most out of it. And I will be here in case you have questions.